Welcome everybody to the very first episode of Indiana's own Home Care Hub. We're here to give you firsthand information on what it takes to run a thriving home care agency here in Indiana. Our first guest I'd like to introduce today is Tyni Birdsong. She's not just my wife, she's also the heartbeat behind our home care business, managing the caregivers, clients, compliance, and everything in between. So today what we're going to do with you guys is we're going to unpack what it really looks like to build something sustainable in this industry so you can move from chaos and move with confidence. So help me in welcoming Tyni Birdsong, everybody. Welcome, Tyni. Welcome. Thank you for coming on and helping us with this first show. How are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
Glad to have you here. So let's jump right in. So before you started in this business, what did you really think business would be like in the beginning, and how did it compare once you got into it?
Yeah, I did not expect it to be what it was. It was very boots on the ground. First things first, we had a team. We've got 3 owners in our home care agency and then little old me as the office manager / executive director. When we started, we started with 2 clients, and me and one of the partners actually went out and started serving those clients as the regular caregivers until we were able to secure staff to manage those clients. So that was a little bit of a shocker for me, but it was totally fine. And I actually appreciated that experience because it is important that owners, agency runners, quite honestly, even executive directors understand all aspects of the home care agency if you're in a leadership role like that. So being able to service those caregivers, I now can let the other caregivers know that I understand what you're going through. I know what it's like.
So you have experience being boots on the ground so you can lead a little better.
Absolutely.
So from the beginning, it sounds like you were pulled into it by other people. You didn't necessarily have a background in it, right?
Very much so. Yes, that is correct. My background is more on the administrative side, as far as managing clients. That's where I started, just in account management overall. So being able to stay organized, do report out, manage the funding, that's kind of where my background was. But you do have to have a heart for caregiving to even be in this agency, or in this industry.
For sure. Without a heart, it's hard to do, right?
Correct.
So let's talk about the first year of the business, because we've been in business how long now?
Since 2022. So yeah, 3 years.
So going back to that first year, let's talk about some surprises, some struggles, some lessons you learned. So when you first stepped into managing the agency, what were some of your biggest surprises? Would you say there's anything that people didn't warn you about?
I think one of the biggest surprises, for me, I think it was about how slow it took for us to grow, because seeing other agencies thrive and grow so fast kind of gave me pause, to be quite honest.
Felt like we were doing something wrong?
Yes, very much so. Felt like we were doing something wrong, or, and we kind of talked about this, we're on the BEADS waiver or the CIH waiver. And a lot of the other agencies who, have been in this industry for years, either started out with, or I knew them to have the Pathways waiver. It's now known as the Pathways waiver, and or
Aged and disabled, right?
Aged and disabled waiver. And that's where I was seeing a lot of folks grow super fast. They were, they had several clients. They were managing, lots of caregivers. There was a lot of growth in that particular area. So I did bring up one day, well, maybe we did it backwards. Maybe we should have started there. But it really was the fact that we were all four of us, the three owners and myself, we were all doing this from the side of our desk. You know, two of the owners have other businesses that they own and run, and then the other two of us had full-time jobs elsewhere. So, it made sense that it grew slow because nobody was doing this full time. So that was one of those surprises.
It takes a full-time focus is what I hear you saying.
Absolutely,
right?
It does.
So let's talk about those first few months, because as you just kind of stated, those first few months or maybe even years in some cases can be overwhelming, right? So you got hiring, scheduling, compliance, billing. What did you do to stay organized and to kind of keep your sanity throughout the process?
Yeah, like I mentioned, that's kind of my background. You have to stay organized. You have to have an administrative system in place to be able to thrive and keep control over clients, caregivers, schedules, billing, all of it, funding, tracking what money's coming in, what money is going out. Like, it's imperative that you are organized. And, one of the easiest things was when we got our first few clients, the electronic visit verification mandate had already gone into place. So that was number one. We had to get an EVV system. Granted, it just so happens that one of the owners owns a software agency Documenter. So it was just a natural progression to just sign up with Documenter and begin using that for caregivers to be able to clock in and clock out of, and, track their locations, do their notes, and ultimately end up billing using, the clock in and clock out that was done for those visits. So that was number one. We had to have it. And, a lot of agencies, when they start out, they may not be able to afford that, which, the state does offer SAN data for free. So if you have to start there, and then as you grow, you have to get, because they're going to give you the bare bones minimum of a software program. So you may have to start there, but then grow into something like Documentor. But the other piece is staying organized using, we use Google Workspace. So I have files for every client, files for every caregiver, tracking those, making sure everybody's compliant, making sure we have the updated CPR, updated license, vehicle registration. That can be tracked in a system like Documenter. But for me, I like to just have my folder. So there is a process that I follow. And then not only that, but I did just want to make one more point. It's also imperative having a team, because I didn't necessarily start off doing all the hiring. I actually didn't even start off doing all the scheduling or compliance. My main focus at the beginning, and this is after working with clients, my primary focus was billing. But then as we grew and, as I kind of branched out, started doing more, we all kind of have all hands on deck approach.
So what I hear you saying here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, so sounds like there was a lot of systems and processes put in place to help make sure things got done, because it sounds like everybody wearing a lot of hats, right?
Absolutely. And not just, I'm me, I'm an electronic person. I don't really care for all the papers, all the printouts. And we do have to have that, especially when we go out to, a client's home. We're working with a family. We do have to sign off on documentation. We have binders. We have all that. But as far as staying organized and having easily accessible information for all of the owners, including myself, it's easy to have some type of a system, electronic system, so that you can, stay organized.
The less paper, the better, right?
100%.
So you basically hit on a problem that every new home care owner is going to face, right? Trying to keep things running. You're wearing a bunch of hats at the same time. Right. Everybody deals with that. So moving on to kind of the culture that you helped build in the leadership within the organization. So you've managed dozens of caregivers. What's the biggest lesson you've learned along the way when you're dealing with caregivers?
Yeah. One thing about caregivers, employees, staff, etc., with people, there comes drama. So being able to be the voice of reason when someone's frustrated because they're working with their client or they didn't get a shift that they wanted, you just have to be able to manage through that with an even temper. Because it can get very frustrating when you've got a busybody or a know-it-all or somebody who's always checking in on somebody else, and they tell you one thing and they go back and say that I said this, like just all the back and forth. I think it's very important that you have those leadership skills to be able to manage all of that.
And keep it professional, right?
Very professional.
We've seen people get in the arguments and scuffles in offices
Yes.
and things of that nature, which
Yes, I've heard
doesn't
of.
look good on the organization, right?
It does not. It does not. And even agency to agency, you still want to present yourself to be as professional as you can be. So yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense. To hear you loud and clear, professionalism, right? That's one of the things that we preach to the people that we teach a lot. Like 90% of growing in this industry is, being reliable and professional in the way that folks see you when they're looking for your organization. So, no, that makes perfect sense. That's a great answer there. So let's move on, but let's stay on the topic of caregivers. We're knowing turnover's huge in this industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what has helped you build a culture where caregivers actually want to stay? Because I can say that we've got pretty consistent group of caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
What can you point to that's made people want to stay with the organization?
I think consistency. We've had client turnover, right? Where we've had staff that worked with a certain client, and that client, for one reason or another, left, whether it was we kind of let them go or they just grew, away from us, whatever the case is. But just ensuring that caregivers and staff, hey, we've got the workload, we want to keep you, and just being consistent with pay, right?
Yeah.
That's important. Offering that competitive pay, and allowing your payroll to be your biggest expense. Because we're in the people business, right? We're here to take care of people, not just clients, but caregivers as well.
Right.
And so we do want to continue to grow, and, we want them to grow. Some people, like, this is their retirement plan. They want to be caregivers as long as they possibly can. And we welcome that, because the same way they rely on us for consistency, we rely on them for consistency. So making sure that, their paychecks are on time, making sure that, they know what the expectation is. And then in the same vein, that they understand what our expectation is as well.
Yeah, awesome. So would you say, staying there, is there something small, a daily habit, recognition, a communication style that's made a difference, for you in your role dealing with caregivers?
Yeah, like being approachable is one thing that I found to be, beneficial and for us. Just allowing caregivers to raise a concern. If they see something and they want to say something, they know that they can talk to us, and that, we as a team, whether they come to you, whether they come to me or any of the other owners, that, we won't belittle them. We won't look down on them. Like, we're here to help them be successful too. And if they feel like they're not getting the resources or tools to be able to take care of clients, they know that they can bring that to us.
And it seems to help you keep caregivers a little longer and a little more satisfied, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yes. And I will say, like, we'll do, just because to show our appreciation for caregivers, because this is not an easy business. And quite honestly, even, in this particular industry, it's like, think about the teachers, right?
Yeah.
Teacher salaries are not the best. And it's, almost the same, even in this particular industry being, with, these being kind of government funded programs, sometimes the pay isn't the best.
So what I hear you saying is, if you're in it for the money,
Yeah,
that may be the wrong reason.
very much so.
But let's caveat
for
that there is money in the industry, but if that's your main focus, then you probably won't be successful.
I agree. I agree. And as it pertains to the caregivers, it is important to, like I said, your biggest expense as an agency truly should be to your caregivers. It should be, that payroll expense. So I have no qualms with giving a bonus for, those outstanding caregivers who show up regularly and consistently.
Yeah, seriously. It kind of had me thinking, people talk to us all the time about that, that new rule where you got to pay out a certain percentage
Yeah, 70, 30.
to caregivers. And if you're not doing that already, you're probably already doing a terrible job, or you're probably not taking care of your people.
Exactly.
One way or another, you're paying your people well, you got administrative costs. There's things that go into providing this care.
Yeah.
That make a big difference.
Yeah, things and a lot. And I do want to add a little bit of just one more point on that, because I did have a caregiver come to me and say, hey, I know what the pay rate is for this service that the client is getting. 70% of that is what I should be getting paid. And I said, pause.
Yeah.
So let's look at the rule together and, just kind of explaining that there's more that goes into expenses, right? We cover the CPR costs. We cover, some of those, we cover like the background checks. We cover some of those onboarding costs that they don't necessarily see.
Mm-hmm.
But, just kind of pointing that out. And where an agency owner may feel like that is totally out of line for the caregiver to say something like that, it's not. Just talk to them.
Yeah.
Be approachable. If you feel like a caregiver is stepping out of line, bringing up topics that shouldn't pertain to them, it's okay.
You should be professional enough to address that.
No,
I love it. So take us behind the scenes here on running the home care agency. So if you had to walk us through what a typical day of an agency owner look like, what does a quote unquote normal day look like, if that even exists?
It doesn't.
Right.
Short answer, there is no such thing as a quote unquote normal day. But it really is just about staying organized, making sure caregivers are where they should be, making sure they're clocking in as it pertains to their scheduled shift time. And if they didn't, life happens. They could have forgotten to clock in. They could have forgotten to clock out. Just fixing those. Yeah, that's a regular thing. But just fixing those, staying on top of them, making sure they're servicing the clients as they should, as it pertains to the PCISP. Checking the mail. Maybe that should have been my answer to what was something that was surprising. And it truly is checking the mail and making sure that you know what to do with some of the information that comes in. I've seen everything from garnishments to child support orders to questionnaires. And we have a payroll company, so that goes back to making sure you're organized, you have the right team in place.
Processes, systems, yeah.
Exactly. And so just knowing like, hey, I've gotten this letter. What does it mean? How do we fix it? And then, of course, we're for-profit business. So just making sure that the billing is accurate, making sure that we're in compliance with state mandates, being on top of those day-to-day client activities so that we, if an incident occurred, we're on top of it. We're so on top of it that we're actually reporting it, before it gets back to the case manager or the state or whatever, but just making sure that everyone is safe.
Being proactive.
Yeah, being very proactive is crucial.
Awesome. So why don't you share a time with us where things didn't go like you planned, maybe a crisis or a client situation, and tell us how you handled that.
So
yep. What you got?
So one was a crisis for one of our clients. There was a familial situation where, the police did get involved, and we had to kind of step in as an agency and remove her from that hostile environment. So we did have to take it a step further and get this client a place to stay. Just because it was so last minute, so late at night, we ended up setting up the client in a hotel. And this is where your people currency comes in. That's what one of our partners say, your relationship skills, right? We built strong relationships with some of our caregivers. So at the drop of a hat, caregiver jumped in and was able to kind of help assist with getting the client into the hotel, getting the client settled. There was a lot of moving parts and pieces, and
This
and
was
it
an
was
emergency
it was
transition.
an
Yeah.
emergency. It was late at night, we're with our families, but we had to do what we had to do. So, that was that was a crisis situation. And I think we came out on top.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Any other situations you can think of, or is that
Yeah, there's one more. This is actually a recent situation, and it goes back to really being compliant with state mandates, right? So one of the mandates for the beads waiver is having a line of credit. In the event that, maybe funding doesn't come in the way that we would expect it,
Sure
but that we
happens.
can keep running our agency as we should. And, life was lifing, and I was unable to get billing done in a timely fashion. And, it was very stressful because the following week was a payroll week, and we just want to make sure that we have all the funds in there so that we can pay staff. And, this isn't something that caregivers should ever have to worry about,
Yeah.
whether I got the billing done in time so that they could get paid.
Not their
That's
responsibility
at all. They
do the
worked the
work.
shifts. Yeah, they
Yeah.
did the work. They should get paid. And so, it was scary. It was very stressful. But, thankfully we had our line of credit like we were supposed to, and we were able to kind of tap into that line of credit to ensure that we met payroll.
But you'd be surprised how many people depend on their billing to pay their people. We've had several conversations with people who are like, I didn't get paid. I can't pay my employees. They're going to leave.
Mhm.
That should never be a situation, right?
Very true.
Employees, they do the work, they should get paid.
Exactly.
Right? Labor law, right?
Right. Yeah. And you just set yourself up for, for an issue with not just the caregivers, but also clients, because now caregivers are like, well, I'm not going to work until I get paid. And now you're unable to service those clients.
Hey,
So,
you wouldn't work for free, right?
exactly.
So switching topics a little bit, let's move on to kind of like your mindset, your motivation behind this. So what would you say to someone who wants to start or get into the home care business, but they don't have enough money? They may not have the correct experience, or they lack confidence. What piece of advice would you give to them if you had to tell that person something?
Well, if you have a heart for caregiving, I think that's the number one thing, right? You cannot go into it with a money mindset, because you see your friend or your family member who's owned a home care agency for all these years, and she's making all this money, and they're doing all these great things. Yeah, that's great to aspire to kind of be there, but I would highly encourage folks to do their research to see if this is something that they want to do. Setting up, reaching out to resources. So William here is a great resource to understand the industry more. Talk to those same friends and family that, you're aspiring to be like. Talk to them about how they got started and what they do. But that's imperative. But if you're interested and you want to do this for the right reason, there's enough out here for everybody. There's, individuals who need services, who need care.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Clients they have choice, right? They can choose who they want to work with. And maybe they're with an agency right now, or, even a caregiver that they're just not comfortable with. Maybe the family's not comfortable with them. They have a choice. They can go to any agency. If you're on that pick list, they can call you, and do an interview with you to see if you guys would be a good fit. So, something that definitely changed for me was understanding the industry a lot more. But like I said, if you have the heart to help, you truly are,
going in the right direction.
Exactly.
Right? So I'll add to that, just a bit of a follow-up. I would say that people have to evolve their mindset a little bit, right? Go from just trying to manage a business to actually becoming a CEO or leading your business like a CEO, because at the end of the day, this is a business. You're the CEO, the owner.
Yeah.
You have to be in charge for moving that business forward consistently. And if you don't, and you don't care, then your business
will fail
will
100%. And not only that, just to add to that, it really it involves the investment. So if you don't understand a particular piece, like I'm telling you now, I don't understand anything with the taxes, some of the forms and letters that I get. I lean heavily on my payroll company to help guide me through what needs to be done. You know what I
some
mean?
things we go to our accountant for,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes. Compliance wise, I lean on the 2 individuals on our team who have experience with the state and understand compliance, and they know how to read the code, So, yeah.
So people who understand and are ready to do the
Building
work.
your team around you so that you can be successful.
Yeah, not a one-person show, right?
Yep.
So, in wrapping up here a little bit, when you think about the future, what kind of legacy do you want this agency to leave? Let's say for your clients, for your caregivers, for other Black-owned providers watching you as an example. What would you say you would want to leave behind for those folks?
Yeah, I just want people to be more inspired. I want our clients to have the best outcome, the best version of their life that they can live, right? Like wholesome, being out into the community, just being, active civilians. That's important to our agency as a whole.
Yeah.
It's just making sure that clients live the best versions of themselves. And in that same vein, it's also the caregivers. I want them, this is their job, right? I don't want our caregivers to dread having to come to work or dread having to work with a particular client because maybe they're not getting along. If that's the case, it's time for us to step in and say, hey, let's move you over here because I don't want tensions to be high.
Sure.
And then just other provider agencies that see us, like I said, I want them to be inspired. I want them to say, you know what, we aspire to be at that level where, hey, maybe we're not, pulling in millions and millions of dollars all at once, but they respect the way that we're running our agency. We do things by the book. We care about the people that we serve, whether it's our clients or our caregivers. So I would want other providers to, be inspired by that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So it's not just about running a business. It's about building something that's changing lives, opening doors for other people, making the community better.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We appreciate you sharing your story today, Ms. Birdsong. If you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about starting your own home care business, you need to take notes from today's conversation. This journey is not easy, but it's possible if you lead with purpose, build systems that support your vision. If you need more resources, follow me on Instagram. You can find me at The Home Healthcare Guy. You can also visit us at yourdocumentor.com, or you can find us on Facebook at Documentor. So please tune in. Thank you for listening. This is the first of many. Thank you, Ms. Birdsong. We'll try the applause out here to see if it works. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yay. We're going to pretend we hear applause. We don't hear it in our headset right now, but we appreciate you guys. I'm the Home Healthcare Guy. This is the first episode of Indiana's own Home Care Hub. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.